Hey Gadget Groupies, we've got another showdown, fight for blood! Pitting the newly delivered Lumia 950 against the aged LG G4. Now I was really torn on how to do this comparison because this is an older phone. This came out almost a year ago, and this is a very, very new phone, which just came out about a month ago. But these two phones feel like they're the appropriate fight for each other. A newer phone like the LG V10 really feels like it should be competing against a phone like the Lumia 950 XL, the slightly larger phone in the Microsoft lineup. So while we're in this sort of transitionary phase, well, before we start hearing proper word on an LG G5, this is really the closer battle between two smartphone manufacturers, IMO. We've got two pretty similar builds in terms of overall smartphone hardware. They're rocking similar processors, they're rocking similar internal specs, and this very much does become a battle between Android and Windows Phone, alongside differing elements of smartphone design and aesthetics. The practicality of owning a device. Right off the bat, looking at screen tech, LG has done a great job of improving their LCD lineup. This IPS quantum display is one of the nicer LCDs that you can find on any mobile product. But if you guys have been following my channel, you guys know that I am a sucker for a nice, contrasty, juicy, saturated AMOLED display from the former Nokia hardware team is still one of the best screens on the market. And I do think that the Microsoft solution has the slightly better outdoor brightness mode once direct sunlight is hitting the front face of your phone. And happily, we get to compare both of these devices at the same resolution, 2560 by 1440. Everything's gonna look nice and crisp, text, fine detail, photos. It's all gonna look really good on both of these devices, though I am giving the subtle nod to the Lumia 950 because of that color and contrast. As we start looking at design and build quality though, I really do feel like Microsoft is devaluing that Lumia name. This is one of the plainer phones on the market right now. It's just a very simple polycarb shell that you can pop off and replace with a nicer backplate, but it's just not very inspired when you pull it out of the box. That's a bit disappointing, as I feel Nokia phones in the past always brought something modern or sleek or cutting edge in terms of the overall look, fit, finish, and feel. But we do have nicely ergonomically laid out controls, and I'm always going to be a fan of having a dedicated camera shutter switch. So this is a two-stage camera button. You can press it to activate the camera and then use it to focus and then take the shot. Nice clicky buttons for the power and the volume rocker, all on the same side. So, you know, especially for us right-handed, right thumb users, this is really easy territory to navigate and operate a smartphone. But it's not to say that the G4 is an ergonomic slouch itself. You know, we have this back button arrangement, which as you start getting used to it, does actually seem to help in seating the phone in your hand and not having to dance it around to reach different controls, different options on the phone. A lot of LG fans have become really big fans of this button arrangement because of how your index finger is going to land on those controls. And while we don't have a dedicated camera shutter button, we at least do have shortcuts on the volume rocker when the screen is off. A quick double tap on one of your volume keys is going to launch the camera and automatically fire off a photo. I thought I had disabled the firing of the photo, but you do still have quick access to a camera. You don't have to unlock the phone and go looking for apps and stuff, and now I have a terrible photo right there in the corner. LG has really been trying to address some of the style criticisms of previous phones. I know a lot of people that are bigger fans of phones like the G2 and G3, but I think what was important about the G4 was implementing some of the design language from the G Flex. We do have this slight taper curve to the screen. It's not as severe as the Flex. It kind of helps ergonomically, in my opinion, and then we also introduced this notion of having different backplates. On LG, you could switch between plastic and leather back cases. This is actual oxblood leather, which I think just looks super, super sharp. When we start looking at camera hardware though, the Lumia 950 has probably my favorite sensor and lens combination. The actual hardware on this camera is formidable. Super crystal clear, super sharp, excellent pixel level detail. And this triple LED flash is kind of fun to play with. I think most indoor flash photos look crummy regardless of what you're doing until you can step up to a really nice camera with an accessory flash that can angle or bounce or diffuse light in a more professional way. But moving over to the camera on the LG G4, I don't think LG sources quite as nice a lens. It's not quite as high quality a glass as, you know, our Zeiss branded PureView camera module here on the Lumia 950. But they do also come with one of these one of the great advantages on the LG system is this laser focusing module, and we're seeing laser focus show up on more devices like Nexus phones, for example. And this really does seem to aid in focus lock and acquisition, providing smoother focus, more accurate focus, and it seems to be less confused at longer distances for things like high contrast lighting situations like holiday lights. Holiday lights on the Lumia has proven to be very frustrating and very inconsistent in when the phone will lock focus and when the phone will get confused. And I absolutely do not have any of those issues using the camera on the G4. Now, what's been amazing about looking at these two manufacturers, their styles for updating their devices and supporting their devices, is over the course of a year, I think LG has gone from having one of the worst camera apps on the market to having one of the best. Even on the G4, we're not talking about the beast, which is the V10. Even on the G4, especially if your main focus is photography, the camera layout here, when we move from the automatic mode into our manual mode, is formidable. Our controls over white balance, manual focus, exposure control, ISO, shutter speed. This is phenomenal control, and especially having all of this information relayed at the top of the screen to better help us understand what it is that's happening with our photos in real time. Microsoft, on the other hand, while the Nokia Lumias started us off on a conversation of having much better controls over our photography, this camera app doesn't seem to have evolved as quickly as LG's camera app has. And so we've got these great options for, controlling ISO, our exposure compensation right there, our shutter speed, manual focus, and white balance. But we can see that this app hasn't aged as gracefully. White balance, I think, is an excellent example of what I'm talking about. We have a manual mode here. So on the G4, I get an actual Kelvin slider, and you see these little icons here next to certain numbers will detail certain conditions. So like at 5,000, that's like sunny conditions. And then I can scroll to, that looks like a fluorescent light, indoor light, incandescent light, and it's going to help me adjust. But I also get much finer controls to dial in a very specific setting for my white balance. Whereas the white balance controls on the Lumia are just 4 hard switches, which represent huge changes in between these different settings, but there's no granular control in between those large adjustments. So I go into like a cloudy setting, go with sunny setting, a fluorescent light setting, and then an incandescent light bulb setting. And that's it. That's all you get. And those adjustments happen very, very slowly as opposed to the really quick adjustments that happen on the white balance for the G4. And if you've been watching my reviews for the Lumia 950, some of the other comparisons that I've shot between the 950 and other phones, I'm just not trusting the output from this camera app. When I make adjustments to things like shutter speed and ISO on the G4, if I purposely make a scene dark, the JPEG rendering pays attention to my adjustments and it keeps the shot dark. Whereas on the 950, if I manually adjust ISO and shutter speed, I can still have the JPEG rendering on this phone jack the brightness by almost 2 stops. And so I'm just never fully trusting the color and the exposure that's coming out of the 950 like I am for still photos when it comes to the G4. Now, where all of this switches is when we start talking about video modes. So video on the 950 is still fairly limited. We don't have the same kind of crazy controls that we do on the V10, but we do have exposure compensation, manual focus, and again, our chunky 4 switch for white balance. I mean, once you hit that video button on the G4, it's just full auto. You can tap the screen to focus on something, and then the camera kind of runs away with everything else. And I really feel that the exposure settings that they've got for their video are way too high, at least a stop in most bright shooting situations. And then it means that your nighttime videos are brighter and grainier, and street lights are getting blown out and signs are getting blown out, and it's not very pleasant. So this G4 is running Marshmallow. I was really hoping we would have seen some kind of update that would have provided us more manual controls over video, but alas, that did not happen. When it comes to audio playback, I'm going to give the Lumia 950 the edge here. I think speaker playback is very similar between these two phones. It would be hard-pressed for me to say there's some clear winner when it comes to speaker output. They're both decently loud, they both kind of distort in similar ways, and they both seem to preference that mid-range audio where the human voice might land. Speakerphone style applications from these, they aren't the best multimedia speakers I've ever heard, but the 950 is going to walk away with a victory for headphone audio playback. The G4 is kind of a hot mess. We still have a louder noise floor, we still have a little bit more hiss, background buzz, air. And again, I'm gonna keep using this phrase evolved. While the Lumia 950 headphone jack hasn't evolved significantly over phones like the Lumia 930, it's still a higher quality headphone playback than what we find on the G4. It's absolutely shamed by the V10, by the iPhone 6s, the HTC One M9, even the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus and Note 5, I think, have higher quality audio playback from their headphone jack, but the 950 represents sort of a transition, you know, from phones like the G4 to phones like the V10. The 950 sits right in between those two devices. And talking a little bit about future tech, I'm excited to be playing with more phones starting to incorporate USB Type-C. This provides the 950 that great continuum feature where you can plug your phone into a larger display and then use it like a traditional desktop PC. You're not seeing that kind of work happening in Android or through LG with a regular micro USB connector. So it is kind of a bummer when you first pull the 950 out of the box and you're like, oh, well, none of my cables work and I have to start reinvesting in new cables and connectors and memory card readers, USB OTG adapters, stuff like that. But once I think this starts to take off a little bit and we have one universal connector, especially once USB Type-C ports start showing up on desktops and laptops, this is gonna be a very fast and very happy transition for a lot of people. I think the capabilities built into Type-C are going to be a lot of fun to play with in the coming months and years. And I also have to give the Lumia 950 the nod for security features. We don't have a fingerprint scanner on either of these phones, but the LG solution for the G4 is knock codes, where you tap on the screen in a certain way and that's going to unlock your screen. I've actually gone back to pattern unlock just because of some of the issues I was having with screen responsiveness after the Marshmallow update. I know for some people it fixed it. It actually seemed to make my screen tap codes a little less consistent. So if you've been having issues with your G4, definitely drop me a comment on that because I'd be curious to see what other people's experiences have been. But the Lumia 950, of course, has the crazy cool iris scanner. So this little red Borg light pops up here in the corner of your phone and it scans your face. And obviously my face isn't right in front of the phone, but it scans your face, looks for your eyes, scans the iris of your eyes, and then activates the phone screen from there. It has been partially defeated by some of the sunglasses that I wear. And a lot of people keep telling me you can totally unlock the phone with sunglasses, but apparently my Ray-Bans are actual Men in Black issue Ray-Bans and just are totally able to defeat the iris scanner on Windows Hello. And a lot of other hardware features are gonna kind of be a wash. We have a very similar battery capacity with the ability to swap the battery, 3,000 milliamp hours for both phones. Both the G4 and the 950 are gonna come with 32 gigabytes of built-in storage and the ability to add SD cards to expand that storage. And they both have pretty similar numbers when it comes to Qualcomm quick charging, being able to charge around 70 to 80% of the battery in under an hour. Both of these perform pretty similarly once you get them on proper 2-amp chargers. Now, where the 950 is going to have a slight edge in power management overall is, of course, the fact that it's got QI compatible charging, wireless charging. You can just pop it down on a little desk cradle or a little desk pad and it'll charge wirelessly through the case. The G4 requires a specialty backplate to do the same thing. These leather backplates didn't come with that feature built in when I started reviewing this phone. But on the whole, both of these phones did a fine job of lasting me a full busy day. Maybe not a full busy day and night, but a full busy day, maybe a little topping off throughout the day because I hit these phones pretty aggressively. Neither of these phones could I ever really truly hypermile for 2 full days of use. That brings us to software. The people that I know who watch my channel, who are fans of Windows devices, Windows 10, and are willing to accept some of the teething pains as we migrate from Windows Phone 8 to Windows 10 for mobile. Now, I don't have the most recent update, the .36 update, I believe. I've still been waiting for it. I've actually been holding off on some of the video coverage just because I know it's going to drop and then I'm going to get a bunch of comments from people saying, oh, but the new update fixes all those problems. You should update your phones. Well, I am currently rocking Marshmallow on my LG G4. Android version 6.0. And actually, the 6.0 update, once it went through a whole ton of app updates, has been pretty sweet. I don't know what's changed in terms of Android when it comes to things like power management, but when both of these phones are on chargers and doing things like updating apps, the G4 is actually running a little cooler. That Qualcomm 808 isn't cooking itself like it used to on Android 5.0, where the Lumia 950 actually does run pretty warm when it's doing multiple things like charging and updating software at the same time. But this phone has aged pretty gracefully. LG software here has evolved well, I think, as we start moving into Android 6.0. We have a snappy performer. I think Marshmallow has kind of cleaned up some of the issues that I had, some of those gremlins that I had with Lollipop. I was not a huge fan of Lollipop. And we now have access to some of the cooler new features like Google Now on Tap, while we still have some of my favorite customizations from LG, like the ability to customize our bottom dock to do things like drop the notification shade. It's a little harder to judge performance on the Lumia series phones right now because they still feel a little unfinished. We need a few more updates. We need a little more polish. And we also need a few more developers to get on board in providing us new apps and services for this platform. I'm really happy to hear some discussion happening about universal apps that will take advantage of Continuum and move between my PC and my laptop and my tablet and Xboxes and other pieces of hardware and gear like that. But right now, we still have just the potential, the promise of what's to come on Windows. We haven't seen it realized yet. I mean, I love the idea of Facebook saying they're going to get new Facebook and Instagram apps ready to go for Windows 10, because then think about all of the tablet and hybrid devices that are going to start playing with Instagram, all the users that are going to be able to interact with that service better. I don't have the ability to do cool Instagram stuff on my desktop PC. You go through a browser and it's terrible. Right now though, and especially for most general consumers out there, the G4 just walks away with a handy victory when it comes to utilizing different types of social services, different types of apps, games, and other software that's written more for this platform than for this platform. Lastly, we should probably discuss price, because the G4 is an older phone. Shopping this thing, you can find some ridiculously good deals for it. It's regularly around that $450 price point, which is already pretty low for a flagship phone. I've seen it drop on eBay for under $400, in like the $380 to $350 territory, for a really well-spec'd phone. The Lumia 950 does not have that kind of pricing advantage for its ecosystem. So we've got a very plain phone out of the box, which is going to retail for $600. And I just can't bring it myself to say, even though I am a fan of Live Tiles, even though I am a fan of Windows 10 and Cortana and what Microsoft is trying to do with this one OS to rule them all, I just can't bring myself to say that this phone is $150 to $200 better than this phone when I'm still experiencing some odd little software gremlins, some really weird design choices, and file management issues. Like, for example, this one really bugged me, and I saved a photo from an email. And so when I go into my Photos app, and I go into my albums, and I go into saved pictures, I see one photo. Now I know there are two photos in saved pictures, because when I exit from my Photos app and I go into my file manager, this is my saved pictures folder, and look, there's this little berry photo that I saved from an email. Why is it that I'm having these types of issues still when it comes to basic file management? You've given me a phone with a great file manager on board, but then you haven't actually given those file management capabilities to very core apps and services like my Photos app, the Gallery app, where I'm going to do most of my managing of my photography. So folks, that's really the big showdown here. Are we talking about a fully realized device, which is a little bit older, or are we talking about the future potential for a platform which is yet to be realized? And that really becomes the big discussion when we start looking at Android devices versus what Microsoft is doing with their Lumia team right now. And of course, I want to hear from you folks. What phones are you rocking out there? For my Windows Phone fans, have you stuck with the platform? Have you migrated? Are you now on an Android device? Or is the Lumia 950 the test bed that you're looking at to hopefully move you into the next phase of Windows 10? I know I've got a lot of G4 buddies out there. I've been seeing your photos on Instagram and Google+. So when we're looking at how you might be positioning for a phone upgrade, are you content with your G4, or are you looking to maybe wander over to a G5 once we get more info on what LG is going to do for this next model year? I'm always curious to hear what you guys are doing with your gadgets, and I love getting into those kinds of discussions. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more rambling comparisons like these. And I would not be able to continue producing on this channel if you all weren't out there supporting it, either by shopping using all of the affiliate links below every single video I produce, or by buying my book. Take Better Photos, Smartphone Photography for Noobs is now available on Amazon to take your smartphone photo game up a notch. And, especially when we're looking at phones like these, we have amazing content creation tools at our disposal, in our pockets 24/7. You definitely want to be getting the most out of your flagship phone investment. And of course, sharing my videos on your favorite social sites like Reddit and Google+ and Facebook and the Twitter is always greatly appreciated, and I can't thank you enough for bringing more cool people to the party. So hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next comparison.